Hi, this is Betsy Scott with the Housing Innovation Alliance. We will get started in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, I'm unmuting you all because I'm trying to look at this on LinkedIn and it's saying they're having issues loading the event. Okay. So it said try again. I'm going to go in my computer and see if it's just my phone.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Hello from Cretech.
I was going to say, you must be at a conference, right?
The fun continues. Yeah. I think I just chased down another customer. So good. I'm always the post-panel ninja where I just walk up and I'm like, hi, I'm Nicole. Nice to meet you. And then try and get the meeting from there.
Well, Nicole, I've been telling a lot of builders in Southern California about your company, so.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, with the legislation coming down the pike in California, it's going to be, we're looking up like, okay, let's make sure we can build quickly enough for this.
Hey, everybody. Just to let you know, somehow it did resolve itself. So our last couple little chats. Hi, everybody online. So everything is showing up now. As that often happens with technology, the dog stopped barking and everything seems to be showing up on LinkedIn. So I'm Betsy Scott with the Housing Innovation Alliance. You can see we've got a lot of experts with us today. We are here to talk about a very exciting project that we launched at the summit in Denver earlier this year. We are doing 2 concept homes with the America at Home study team, and we have several folks with us today to talk about different aspects of the project, all the way from the research behind it to collaboration and to the 3 areas that we have listed there: livability, constructability, and sustainability. And we're really excited to be talking about this because as the Alliance, we look at innovation holistically for the production building sector. And if you peel the layers back as we're talking about this project, it really deals with 4, if not all 5 of the missions that we have for driving innovation in the industry. On the design and build side, we're going to be looking at modular construction and what that enables us to do in terms of attainability and sustainability and quality. We're going to be looking at the aspects of this project that on the home as a service side deal with attainability and the build to rent aspect of the Picket Fence as a project, as well as a really cool ADU that's included in that home. On the ESG front, we look at sustainability. Nicole is going to be talking about the carbon calculations behind this building, as well as the livability and the health within the homes and the importance of that to the end consumer, whether they're buying or renting. And then we're also going to be looking at the role that data and technology play in this type of a project. So really a holistic look at innovation and how we can do things differently in the industry. So before we get into the project in more detail, I want to pause for a moment and thank all of our partners in the Housing Innovation Alliance, our transformation and innovation partners, without whom we would not be able to put on programs like this and to collaborate with all of the great people that we're going to be talking to today. So thank you for those of you who may be online. And I'm just going to bring everybody back in and just welcome you guys. So if you have questions for everybody today, go ahead and type those at any point. And we'll be watching that. Both Natalie and I will be watching any questions or comments that come through on LinkedIn. We've got 2 Q&A breaks. So we're going to start the agenda today with Teri, who's going to talk about the data from the 3rd wave of the American Home Study that has actually been used to facilitate the ideas and the design principles behind and values behind this project. Then Dennis is going to talk about kind of the collaborative effort, how everything came together there. Ryan from Dahlin is going to talk about innovation in the design itself and introduce the concept to you in more detail for the Picket Fence. We'll wrap up the first segment with Dennis and Nicole talking about sustainability and the carbon impacts of the house and how those are being looked at. Then we'll do a Q&A break, and then we're going to get to the real meat and potatoes of delivering things realistically through the modular factory with SMI through Eric Newhouse, and then we'll do another Q&A break at the end. So I'm going to go silent for a while. I know that might be hard for some of you to believe. Teri's going to be actually facilitating everything, and I'll pop back in when we're doing Q&A. And I will see all of you soon.
Great. Well, thank you, Betsy, and thanks everybody for being here this afternoon or this morning, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm going to take just a few minutes, and I have no illusions. You're not here to hear somebody talk about data and show you a bunch of slides around numbers and facts and figures for the next hour and a half or whatever the time is we have. So I'm going to hit it really high level and then get into the meat of the matter, which is the awesome concept home that was created as a result of this, and we'll have the team talk a bit about that. But just to level set, the American Home Study is the only longitudinal study of early, peak, and post-pandemic consumer insights as a result of life that we've all lived over the past few years, which really gives us some great insights and learnings around how we think about home and community and how that might have changed over time. Next slide, please, Betsy. And so what I'm going to do, as Betsy said, is just touch on some of the high-level insights from our Wave 3 data. We've run the survey now 3 times with almost 10,000 responses. Wave 3 was October of 2022. And to sum it up, we learned 4 key things in addition to a number of other detailed insights. Number 1 is wellness is a key purchase motivator like it's never been before. And I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Efficiency is really critical. Every inch counts in our homes, and including how we use the public space in our communities. Flexibility is really key, and not just in the rooms in the home, but actually we use the term spaces, and Ryan's been really good about reminding us to think about spaces, not just rooms. So how we use space has changed forevermore. And then we really saw an uptick in the number of people being more willing than ever to accept both a smaller home and a smaller yard, which probably gets to some attainability questions. Let's touch on wellness first. Next slide. Thanks. So what you see here is data from Wave 3 that really compares the difference between what level of wellness is important to people and how satisfied they feel with each of those various wellness domains in their lives. Really quick squint test, you can see there are some gaps. The yellow bar is how important that particular element of well-being was ranked by 3,000 consumers. And the blue bar is how satisfied they are and how they're doing at achieving that level of wellness in their life. You can see very quickly the biggest gaps are financial and physical well-being, which for those of us involved in creating homes and the built environment, it really brings to the surface the importance to think about attainability and affordability, and also how our physical space can affect our well-being. So if we go to the next slide. Well, the real takeaway between 2020 and 22, again, because we have that longitudinal data, is Americans are feeling less well today than they were during the peak of a global health pandemic. Like, let that sink in for a minute. There's been a 17% decline in how well we feel physically since 2020, an 11% decline in how well we feel financially, and an 8% decline in our level of satisfaction with our emotional well-being. These are pretty big numbers, but the great thing is the built environment can impact one's level of wellness and well-being overall. So let's talk about that a little more. Next slide, please, Betsy. If you can make that a little larger so I can see it, that'd be great. Thanks. We also asked about the top activities that people were doing in their home as a result of living more life from home. And no surprise, they were home-based, right? So shopping online, exercising more at home, cooking and baking, eating together with friends and family, spending time with people you live with. The kind of orange colored chart is wave 2 data. The green chart is wave 3 data. We did this to show that really the behaviors that change as a result of living more of our lives from home have stuck post-COVID. And some of those changes we think are lasting. If you go to the next slide, it's no surprise some of the changes that have actually decreased. So we're playing less time on video games than we were during the heart of the pandemic. We're spending less time scrolling and doom scrolling on social media. And while online shopping, we think, is here to stay, and that has impacts for space in the home as well as storage. We're doing less things like grocery and food delivery to our homes now that COVID is sort of endemic and a bit more in our rearview mirror. Next slide, please. So if we're doing all of these different behaviors, well, where are we doing them? And what does that mean about the home design and how our homes live in the future? We were quite surprised, at least I was personally, to hear that our respondents said the family room was the most important room in the house, followed by the primary bedroom and the kitchen. I know many of us, whenever I ask people, what do you think the most important room in the house is? Many people say kitchen. And it's still important. And what I'm showing you here are some of the subtle differences between various demographic segments and what they believe is the most important room in their homes. There are lots and lots of more layers of data, including absence or presence of children, which really affects which home is important, and some nuances between the different boomer segments, the younger and the older boomers. But again, I know you're not here to listen to data today, so let's keep rolling. So this is a really interesting slide. We also, because we had the opportunity and have to work with the Housing Innovation Alliance and all of their partner teams that are really focused on sustainability, new technology, and so on, we added a question to wave 3 of our study, which was really asking about the wellness and sustainability features in a home that people thought were important to their own personal wellness. Hard to see on the slide, on the screen perhaps, but the PDF will be available afterwards as well for you to dig in more detail if you're interested. What I want you to notice: conserving energy and water, eliminating chemicals and VOCs, low E windows, whole home air filtration systems, and then the macro, a home that minimizes its environmental impact, were all important features to one's personal well-being for more than 50% of the respondents. And all of these are key outputs of the offsite construction methodology, which is super exciting. So if these are important to them, if you go to the next slide, Betsy, why were they important? Well, having done consumer research for about 20 years now, typically when you ask about sustainability, energy resources and so on, saving money is the #1 motivator for why people choose those technologies. This is the first time ever that I've seen improves my health and wellness rise to the top. I'll give it to you. It's only a 1% point difference, but it's now the #1 purchase motivator for choosing these technologies in new homes and communities. Huge opportunity. So, we've heard the moniker health is the new wealth. I think it's really wellness is the new why. Wellness is why people will choose to purchase different things in their homes and look at homes that think about their environmental footprint differently today than ever before. Next slide, please. So really, in summary, what this is all about and what I hope we'll show you today with this amazing team is that we started with insights about what people want in a home. Then we collaborated with a team, a multifaceted, multidisciplinary team, on designing a home for the future that we think will address some of these needs. And really, that's innovation in action. And there's no one better to talk about that than Dennis Steigerwalt.
All right. Thank you, Teri. I'll tell you, all that data is a tough act to follow. And all that data is exactly why this partnership started, just over a year ago now. So Teri and I had a chance to connect at the Urban Land Institute's spring meeting in San Diego in March or April of 2022. And in that conversation, I had a lot of praise for the study and the work that they did on the first concept home, which is the Barnaby house they delivered with Garmin Homes in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I said to Teri, I said, I got a great idea. just hear me out here. If you were to run a second set of concept homes, would you be willing to invite the Alliance in and share some of the things that we're working on? And she was enthusiastic about the concept and the idea there. And what we said was, let's look at the livability and the design nuance that comes from the consumer work that they've done. But let's tie that to the constructability for the industry. And with where the market's at, we really need to be focused also on the whole attainability underpinnings. So with that, our concept homes were born. And thank you for switching already, Betsy. That's great. So on this slide, we started first with that attainability piece. Let's really look at how we can solve for missing middle housing and bring that into our entire design charrette process. And when we talk about constructability, let's look at an industrialized construction approach. And this is something that we've had our fingers on the pulse on for years now, but we've also been running a working group specifically focused on this topic. So I said, let's extract some of the learnings from the working group, take some of the lessons learned, some of the opportunities that exist, and apply volumetric modular construction to the challenge that we're about to take on. Next slide, please. So what we did is we had the baseline of the first two waves of study, the third wave, which Teri just walked you through. And we took that, we overlaid it with the nuances of the buyers specific to the sites that we wanted to work on within the Pittsburgh market. And then as we took that and applied it, we looked at what were the guide rails of using the methodology and the materials that we wanted to incorporate into this project that would allow us to deliver both a for sale and a for rent home through this concept program. Next slide, please. So in typical Alliance fashion, we threw everyone in a minivan, flew them to Pittsburgh first, then threw them all into a minivan and ran around the Pittsburgh market to better understand the process, the people, and the products behind delivering a home using volumetric modular construction. So we had a chance to visit a few factories. We visited with a few finished projects. And through that exercise, we were really able to understand what could be done and how these solutions not only could apply actually in the Pittsburgh market, but how they have applications throughout the United States as a whole through vacant lot applications. If you'll jump to the next slide. So through that tour, we were able to take the three founding groups behind the American Home Study, overlay that with the four creative and inside groups that were part of the first two waves, and then bolted on or integrated our group of experts from the local market, which was SMI, EcoCraft, City Studios, a local architect, and Tangible Materials, along with a media partner, professional builder, to help us communicate this message to the world. So what you see here is the team that we've assembled to deliver on the first two concept homes that are coming out of the third wave of the study. If you wouldn't mind, Betsy, jump next. So now with the team assembled, it was time to gather and ideate. So we brought everyone together and connected the dots on the consumer nuances that were desired and the desires of those consumers, applied to the sites and the locations that we were working with, and truly understanding the guide rails, as I mentioned, or the kind of the rules to deliver these homes for these consumers following the methodology and the process that was volumetric modular construction specific to the partners we'd be working with in Western Pennsylvania. So through that process, we identified it. We worked on our sites and made sure that what we were going to design for this site, again, was applicable to other sites in Pittsburgh, as well as other sites around the United States so that we could share the model. Next slide. It was I'll say a competitive and collaborative process. We divided into teams, worked through various iterations of different approaches that we could take, and you could jump to the next slide to get a little bit more of that. And then ultimately what we came back with after a few days of being locked in a room together was we came out with some great friendships, stronger relationships, a better understanding of what it takes to deliver a home using this design build methodology of volumetric modular and industrialized construction. And then ultimately we landed at the final two concepts. If you can give me the next slide, that'd be great. Awesome, thank you. And where we landed was two homes. One I mentioned that would be for rent and another that were for sale. And taking into consideration what we talked about when we talk about missing middle housing typologies, the Picket Fence, which Ryan White's going to get into much more detail on, became a great understanding of how can we create two units that look like one and create a great home environment. And Ryan will dig into the details there. And then the other one was the 412, which allowed us to create a paired home, a paired townhome concept, which utilized, again, not only the sites that we had specifically selected, but could be leveraged on sites throughout the city of Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, across the country. So that's how this whole thing was born and how the team came together. And Ryan, I'll leave it to you to run down the picket fence and share with everyone how we came about the design principles there.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, if you go to the next slide, perfect. Yeah, so the picket fence, and I want to start with, as Dennis talked about this ideation, Teri talked about the data. I think a lot of the times when you come to concept homes, they become just a concept, but this is an effort where we were able to actually put the D in R&D. It's something we're very proud of, to go through this whole process and really have something tangible that someone will actually live in. So this is an amazing thing. And as Dennis mentioned, with the ideation process, it was really taking the time to understand who's going to live in these homes and how will they live. So with that, in the process, it's holding each other accountable as we make decisions in design. It's designing to the design principles for this home, for this buyer, or in this case, this renter. So with this renter, this is actually the trailblazer millennial demographic. They're 25 to 34 years of age. They're actually the highest average earning income of all the millennial demographics. And 41% of them are couples with kids, and 29% of them are couples without kids. And what's interesting about this demographic, though, is 33% of them prefer to rent. I think they're just starting their families. They're not maybe ready to settle down. So this is still a transition for them until maybe their kids get to an age where they're ready to go to school. So they're going to find that right area to move to. So on the next slide, you're going to see an actual picture of the ADU on the first floor being built. And the ideation and construction, the collaboration didn't stop when it was pencils down in the design. Eric and the Dolan team and the whole team, actually, with weekly calls, we really made sure that as the homes were being built, we still collaborated to make sure our design principles were in place. And as Teri mentioned, with the wellness aspect being so important to this demographic and this renter, as we started to get into some of the designs that we came up with in the initial sketches and collaboration, we found as we started getting into costing, as typically happens in a project, you need to start value engineering. So how do we remove windows while not sacrificing the amount of natural light that's so important to the spiritual and emotional wellness inside of home? As we start to get into constructability, making sure we have proper shear so we're not adding cost that would raise the rents of these homes, as Dennis mentioned, the attainability. So it's really that process continued all the way through, and it was just something that was a collaboration all the way to till these homes are actually now built and out in the yard at the factory. So on the next slide, you're going to see the floor plans themselves. As we talked about attainability too, one of the thoughts on this as we started to design these homes is the site would have allowed us to do a 65-foot deep module. But what we learned from the factory was that if you went to 64 feet, it allowed them to build all 3 modules on the line at one time. And by reducing that 1 foot, it built efficiency in the yard, in the factory, while not sacrificing any of the livability or aesthetic of the home. So that was a very important thing to learn in the process and the collaboration on this. Also with this, the reason that I think it was a great solution, what we did, is Dennis mentioned that missing middle, that ADU downstairs. If we were to just volumize this and make this a one whole unit with a square footage, probably too large, that makes the rent unattainable for the demographic in this area. So the ADU is a great way to add another option, another unit, and then the main unit upstairs. So the ADU is a 660 square foot unit on the first floor. It enters off the front of the street, and I'll go into that a little bit in a minute. But the main unit enters off the rear with a private alley, and it sits above that with the 2 floors with a 2007 square foot townhome. So on the next slide, you're going to see one of the design principles we came up with, and 94% of this demographic say the first impression and safety is key. So where these homes entered, how they entered was very important. The ADU, the reason we put that on the front is it got enough room to have an actual yard with the picket fence, which was where the name was derived from. We had a traditional picket fence on this small little home. You get a private yard and a great front porch before you enter the home. So that creates some separation from the actual street to the home, adding a sense of safety for the occupants of this home. The reason we put the main entry of the upper unit and the bigger unit on the back of the home was this home actually has an alley back there. You're still going to get that room for their own little yard with the picket fence, but they have room for a private parking space. So with the bigger home, we felt it was a little more valuable to allow them to have a private parking space as well. And what this also did was create a true vestibule. So when your guests do arrive, you could greet them there. You can take their coats, and you really have a sense of safety before you bring them upstairs into the rest of the home. So as you go upstairs, you're going to see on the next slide, The family room, 67% of this demographic say this is a place to gather. This is where you entertain with your friends. This is where you socialize. So this is a space where the location is very important, and how it lives in the home is very important. And the next slide, you're going to see the design principle we came up with that is that the family room is the heart of the home. So its location is very key. The indoor-outdoor livability for that wellness aspect, the amount of natural light that comes in there, the adjacency to the kitchen, as they're entertaining and gathering with friends, this is really important. Another key factor that you'll know about this is the location of both the family rooms and where the private outdoor space is for these homes. And this really has to do with the holistic approach to wellness for community. With the ADU having the front yard and the front porch on the street, the main unit above also has a private deck that can look down on the street. Now you have more eyes on the street. That adds for safer communities. So now it's a holistic approach to wellness for community and not just for home. So on the next slide, you're going to see the adjacency. The other design principle is the hub of the home. The hub of the home is the kitchen. The kitchen is for more than just cooking. The kitchen now is a place to entertain. This is the place where you're going to have appetizers, but it's also functional to cook. So we wanted to make sure that it was right sized. We really paid attention to how the storage works in these homes. We really made the effort to have no dead corners. And as you can see on the main unit in the middle of the screen, the island is right sized because this is also the place you're going to dine. The image on the right shows how that island can flex. You can expand it for when it is time to eat dinner. There's plenty of room. We actually had the pantry on the left of that island step back to the depth of the upper cabinet, so you have more floor space. It's comfortable to sit there, still have room for someone to walk by behind you. Same thing the other side, the way the cabinets and then extra storage. We got plenty of storage in this kitchen, how that stepped back to allow for more floor space and functionality. But that really part of that island became a great spot to be that true hub that links you from the kitchen to the family room and then even the views out to the private deck. On the ADU, we also did that kitchen where you have the room for some stools because this is maybe the smaller couple, the two of them eating, and it might flow into the family room for that connection. So on the next slide, and as Teri mentioned with the data she showed on the most important rooms in the home, we already touched on the family room, but the primary bedroom is another one that is very important to this demographic. 43% of them feel this is a space for more than just sleeping. They're probably not far removed from times when they had roommates. They probably spent a lot of time in that primary bedroom when they had roommates. So they're very comfortable spending time in this space. It's sleeping, it's relaxing, it's watching Instagram videos, it's probably even working or exercising. So on the next slide, you're going to see how we incorporated our design principles to that, which this is their precious personal space. So with the main unit upstairs, we really focused on what that meant, being more than just a bedroom. So as you can see on the bottom of that upper floor, we enhanced that space and added a lounge. This has room for us, a love seat. You could probably put a Peloton in there, a desk for working. This is that space where they're going to spend time, unwind personally before they go back down to the heart of home. And the heart of the home is where they're going to socialize with the rest of their family or their guests. We were actually able even to accomplish this in the ADU, being such a small footprint and a small unit. In the lower right that you're going to see is we've had this space where you could put a desk so someone could work from home. You could have a space for a little love seat or a couch. You could put a Peloton there. So it still gives them, even on this smaller 660 square feet unit, a place for their precious personal space. And then on the next slide, you're going to see the flex space. The flex space is 33% of this demographic say home is a place to work. And as we've talked about, the high percentage that this is couples with kids or no kids, that probably means two people working from home. So the flex space needed to be a space that is thought about more than just as a bedroom. And on the next slide, you're going to see our design principle that was square footage where it counts. Typically, when we design homes, we really think of bed bath count. And as Teri mentioned earlier on, that we really focused on space count. Once you define it as bedroom, that's 10 foot by 10 foot minimum with a strip closet. So think of that size of space that is allocated for a function of just bedroom, that you could tell them that it's optional for something else. But as we mentioned with the size of family for this demographic, what's needed, it doesn't need to be 10 by 10. This can be the space that gets downsized. It's a space where they could work. Since the lounge in the primary bedroom has that other desk space, the couple has two places to work from home. It could be a place to just relax. As you see in the image, it could be a small library. This could be a place to exercise. Or as their family's growing, maybe this becomes the space that The upper bedroom is where their younger child or their first child lives, and the flex could even become a nursery as their family starts to grow. So square footage where it counts was really key on this home, and the last design principle I'm going to cover. And we'll turn it back over to Dennis and Nicole to talk about sustainability.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Ryan. Great walkthrough. So I just to kind of kick things off, I want to reconnect our sustainability and resilience goals back to the whole theme around constructability. And the first of these goals comes back to, when we talk about high performance home, this is really tying back to a lot of the data that Teri shared at the beginning of this conversation around the livability element. And it's really, how do we focus on the indoor air quality desires, the clean water, and think about comfort overall as a consumer and those living inside this home, and how they enjoy their space and create peace of mind, even in the face of a major climate event, for example. The next goal, focusing on construction or waste generation, really starts to tie into how we as an industry can look at and achieve some of the goals that are being laid out, which Nicole's going to share with us what's happening on a national scale. But really, how does shifting things from offsite or on-site to offsite impact the waste that we generate through the build of a typical residential home? And then if we think about, we want to be people friendly, we want to be planet friendly. How does this all tie back into the footprint we leave on the planet as we create more built environment? So really taking a look at an ambitious goal around carbon reduction as it relates to embodied carbon and operational carbon. And for today's conversation, we're going to really dig into the reduction in carbon emissions. If you can hit to the next slide, please. So when we talk about the reduction in carbon emissions, this is something that we certainly could not take on our own. So we're very excited to have a fantastic team working with us. We have Nicole Granith from Tangible, who'll be explaining to you how we're approaching this process holistically. But we also have a great resource in our friends at Cal Poly with Miriam Kuhi-Rostami. I think I got it right, Miriam. Hopefully that worked. But Miriam's been a great resource to us in understanding the implications on embodied carbon within the build methodology itself. So she's really helped us to create a framework and break that down. And why that's important is, if you kind of look at the entire life cycle of the built environment here on this diagram, it's important to understand where we're focusing on for the purposes of our study today. So we're going to look at the embodied carbon that goes into the manufacturing of a product, the logistics of that product, and then ultimately how the home is built for the direct emissions piece. So if you think about this, then we're going to add on the operational emissions component to it, which is helping us understand not only what are we putting into the house, how are we putting the house together, but then also how is the house being operated and what impacts does that have on the long-term impact on the environment. So with that, and glad to have Nicole here to dig into this deeper with us. But Nicole will be able to share with you how Tangible is supporting this and creating transparency around what we're doing from a carbon characterization perspective.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Excited to share with you all the work that Dennis so kindly teed up there. I think a lot of what we've been honored to be involved in this project stems from is the spirit of collaboration that each of the members of the coalition have come to the project with. And so we're excited to contribute our part to that. So for our part, thank you, Betsy, our goal as a company is really to turn buildings into a solution to the climate crisis. There's a lot going on right now that is making the impacts of the changing climate very real and easy for us all to understand the direct effects on our life. And so one area that I know, obviously, as Teri was talking about, we are having some additional reconsiderations as maybe a broader society around what types of purchasing decisions we're making, what types of spaces we want to occupy, and ultimately how we are going to have those reflect the world that we want to build. So next, the problem that we need to address in order to get there is thinking about how exactly we are going to alter the materials that we're building with. And as Dennis mentioned, a lot of the impact of constructing a house comes up front from the materials that are selected. Globally, these building materials are responsible for 11% of all emissions. And then within any given house, the emissions to create those building materials tend to be equivalent to about 10 years of actually operating that property. So you have a really big moment here to make a decision around what types of materials we want to use in the project. And I think the Picket Fence house is a perfect example of where an opportunity exists. Yes, thank you. So because this is such a massive impact, and you have areas of our lives that maybe feel a little bit more tangible, like the fashion industry and flights, but with building materials, it's a little bit more difficult to get our hands around. I think bringing it back to the ways that the Dahlem team has talked about all of the different demographics that are going to be the reasons that demographic is going to be interested in the picket fence. The goal here is to make it evident that the actual power lies in our hands, and to that end, we are working with the team to make it incredibly transparent about what decisions were made about the building materials there. Next slide. Thank you. And then additionally, we are seeing that a lot of this is happening against the backdrop of increasing legislation. So right now, obviously, the picket fence, located in Pennsylvania, is an example for the rest of the country, for the rest of North America, on what exactly can happen as we are scaling this across the North American market and taking a look at folks who are occupying all sorts of different markets across the country, across in Canada, and the ways that they can make sure that they are ahead of time compliant with upcoming legislation. So again, goal here is to be incredibly transparent about where these material selections will have the biggest impact. And so that's where Tangible comes in. We are measuring the embodied carbon of the Picket Fence concept home and are excited to show you exactly how we are going about that. Thank you. So a few quick key things to chat about here. The first is that what we are doing is taking an overview of the bill of materials that are being used in the picket fence construction. Then our team is matching the environmental product declarations, or the declarations that tell you what the carbon footprint of any given material is, to those specific materials that are being used in picket fence. And our founding researcher, Emily Flynn, is leading the charge on this and really making sure that we have the most accurate angles of all of the EPDs that are going to represent those products. And then that as we are going through and confirming those emissions factors in the units, that we are also working in close collaboration with Dr. Miriam Kohistami on what blank spaces exist and where there are areas that she has been able to create new environmental product declarations. So lastly, the piece of where we're focusing the effort on doing this measurement is very much looking at the material selection standpoint. So the goal of this analysis is to highlight the embodied carbon hotspots. And this embodied carbon, or the carbon that is emitted to produce these building materials, is one of the core areas that we upfront in designing the picket fence concept home have to massively impact the environmental impact of the home itself. And as a lot of these projects, thank you, are continuing to go out, the beauty of what the analysis that we're doing right now is that these findings can then be applied to any of the future concept homes or to any of the additional iterations to the 412 that is coming up. And so there are a lot of learnings to be had from studying what types of building materials are in the project right now, how we can transparently declare that, and then how that can help inform future decisions as well. So the last piece around this is really that there is a scalable way to see the embodied carbon of the picket fence concept home. And this is something that, again, we're incredibly honored that the team brought us in to partner with all of you, because it's a very important factor that, if not considered early, can be difficult to change, but because we're able to take a look now, give this transparent overview of the impacts, there's a lot of opportunities for where down the line in the future some of those adjustments and alternative products can be made.
Oh,
Betsy, you are
muted.
muted.
I did that to myself. I'm going to pull everybody back in. And know if we have any questions so far. That was a great overview. I know there were a lot of people who were at the summit in Denver earlier this year who wanted to hear more about kind of the progress of where we were with the project and how everything's been going so far. So I think, even talking to you guys over the last couple of days, it's really cool that there are two homes because you're learning things here and you can even have almost an immediate impact in, as Nicole was alluding to, in trying new things in that second home as well. I'm hearing a little click if anybody's, I don't know where that's coming from. At any rate,
I think it might be you, Betsy. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
It's all good now.
So somebody's enjoying the show with some popcorn, huh?
Yeah.
I know, that's right. Live TV, guys.
So
there were a couple of things that you shared offline with us, where some of the data came from Mindbase. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. We have two things. One is kind of the bigger scope that I'm going to share here, and then we have the two consumer groups that you could talk about a little bit more. So can you give us a little bit more of the background on how Mindspace was used as a tool in the
that's great.
design process?
I can take that one, Betsy. Thanks for the question. So Kantar Consulting is one of the leading consumer insights firms in the nation, and we've been partnering with them now on wave 2 and 3 of our study. And what that allows us to do is to basically take all of the responses to the study. So in wave 2 was 4,000, wave 3 was 3,000. And then Kantar does what's called an append, and they append the responses with their customer segmentation tool, which is Mindbase. And Mindbase is unlike other tools that many of you may have used before, like Claritas or Valves, which uses a like follows like methodology. So in other words, if Dennis and Teri live on the same street and they're next door neighbors, those methodologies would say that Dennis and Teri are the same person, which clearly is not the case. What Mindbase does is uses 45,000 different data points to identify each one of us individually into one of these consumer segments that are based on behaviors, values, and attitudes. And so that really gets to a finer grain level of detail. And in the case of the millennials, as Ryan said, we selected the Trailblazer segment as that particular target audience for the Picket Fence. So it allowed our team to look much more deeply behind the Trailblazers' motivations, their attitudes about personal versus private space, their risk aversion, their willingness to invest money in different ways. So lots of different sort of depth of analyses. And then for the 412 home, which, as Dennis said, is the for sale home that's next up in this team's repository of insights, if you will, and creativity, the full throttles is one of the boomer segments. That will be our target buyer group that we will then really dive into again in more detail to understand their needs and wants, and then to create design principles that Ryan and the Dolan team can bring to life through planned design. So Betsy, the real reason we engaged with Mindbase was, as Ryan said, to understand who will live here specifically, not just generally, and then how do they want to live, so we can create better solutions for how these people want to live.
And Teri, what they're willing to choose in home too.
That's right, exactly. What the trade-offs are.
So everybody online didn't have the benefit of seeing everything zoomed in as I was looking through things as we were getting ready for today. But we do have a PDF that before the end of the call today, Natalie's going to share a link to that so you guys can access it online. But I'd encourage you to do that because you can zoom in a lot of the additional detail in the research, in the design, and then certainly we're going to be touching on the constructability of the home as well, and how everything comes together there. I also had a chance to talk to Nicole a couple of days ago. I'm working with Green Builder Media and about 70 other companies to do guidelines for ESG in the housing space. Since the guidelines we've been using to date are really chemical industry driven, which isn't really the same thing as what we need as an industry. So we've been working on that, and carbon is certainly a new area for calculating, and there are some hurdles to overcome. And we had a great conversation about the fact that you're not just going to be a calculator tool, but Tangible is also going to offer a little bit of the guidance on how to think about it. So kind of the strategic process in using an online tool to do that. So I think that would be really helpful. So glad to hear you guys are focused on that effort.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think that's why we were so excited to be pulled into the Picket Fence concept home, because there are a lot of opportunities to talk with folks and say, hey, this doesn't have to be that onerous of a process, and it doesn't have to be something that just exists in a black box. If we know what materials are going in, then we can take a look at what the impacts are, and then we can start to show where some of those potential swaps can actually have the biggest potential effect.
So all of this stuff is great in theory so far with everyone that we've heard from so far today, but here's Mr. Reality. Eric House. He's with
Give us
SMI.
a dash of cold water.
No. There are some cool things that you were sharing that you'll be sharing today about how you took the vision of, the data coming from Teri's group and the sustainability efforts from Nicole and Dennis focusing it, and the design principles from Ryan. So there are some really nice ways that you've dovetailed that into how can that be accomplished in the modular housing space. So we're going to turn the floor over to you. If anybody has any other comments or questions, we'll have another Q&A toward the end. So go ahead and put any other comments that you have here. I'll be watching for those. But we're going to have Eric give you guys a little bit of an overview on the constructability side. So say bye to everyone else for a minute, and we'll see you guys again shortly. And Eric.
Okay, great. Yeah, first, again, it has been a pleasure, continues to be a pleasure for Structural Modular Innovations to participate in this dynamic and exciting project, whereby we really are taking on the challenge of innovation and bringing it to reality. So there really were three items that I wanted to focus on today. There are many lessons learned already through this project and this process. So the first challenge was, to focus it down onto some key items that could be communicated in this session. And those were shear walls, which does dovetail into window openings as well, how we optimize windows types and color. And then third item that I'm hoping to explain some of the key challenges from a constructability standpoint is the air distribution, HVAC system, and the framing systems of the home, how those were integrated in the modular delivery environment to optimize comfort and energy efficiency. So first, shear walls. What's shown on these images are the schematic design that was the result of the collaborative process that the others have already described, where we came up with kind of our first pass at how we would deliver on these great design principles and ideas. And the challenge that was the first item we had to work through with our engineering team at the factory is that this is a stacked townhome on an urban infill lot. So the lot is 22 feet wide, 100 feet deep. So by definition, the home is fairly narrow and fairly deep front to back, and also tall in order to provide for the two units in the one residence. The end result of that is that the building, from a standpoint of shear requirements, is acting as a big sail, with the long sides of the building being exposed to more substantial wind loads. A typical kind of prescriptive engineering or constructability solution, if we were just going to standard protocol from prescriptive code compliant strategies, would be to configure the front and the back of the home as shear walls, which means they would be largely opaque surfaces with structural sheathing. Clearly, that would conflict with health and wellness objectives and the key design principles. So what we needed to work through was, instead of a prescriptive approach, a creative and innovative engineered solution. And the key component of that engineering strategy is something that is referred to as a portal frame. So the next slide shows some drawings prepared by the production and engineering staff at the factory. And to explain the concept, these drawings are focused just on the second floor front porch of the home. So the right side of the screen is a plan view of that front porch. And then what's shown on the left side of the screen is a front elevation of a portion of the front wall of that porch. So again, on the plan view, the wall highlighted blue was built as a portal frame, and that's comprised of the two short side walls functioning together with the header across the top of that frame as a complete structural element that is providing shear resistance to, again, those lateral forces and wind loads. And the key to the portal frame is that it does provide for a large opening in the middle of that portal frame. So the engineered solution combines the 2x6 wall framing with the header above, with structural sheathing and a very specific nail pattern for fasteners to accomplish those shear requirements. And this got into very careful coordination with Dahlin and Ryan and the full team at Dahlin to understand the exact dimension of the two wall segments on either side of the portal frame, the size of the header. So we ended up being able to make just some minor adjustments to the schematic design to be true to the design intent while meeting the structural requirements. So the next slide shows, again, on the left side, the schematic design of the front of the home before going through the engineering process of working through the shear wall requirements. The right side shows the final design. And in some respects, you can see differences, but I also would hope that you would agree that the fundamental design intent was still accomplished and not compromised by implementation of these engineered solutions. Another key aspect of that is, in the factory setting, we are able to define these engineered solutions up front, kind of build the home on paper, so to speak, and then have processes and procedures in place at the factory with trained staff that are overseen by quality control assurance personnel and third-party inspections to repeatedly and with great confidence implement these strategies so that you really truly can optimize these performances and know that you're accomplishing the structural requirements. So the second piece or lesson learned or challenge that we really had to focus on is, again, intimately connected to the shear walls, and that is the window design. So the home initially, actually, if you could go back one slide for me, Betsy. Yeah. So again, you see on the left-hand side the schematic design, and the right-hand side you see the final design. We had to optimize the number of windows to where possible, instead of having 9 smaller windows, condense some of those into larger fixed windows to still provide for the same daylight, but again, accomplish cost-effective delivery of the home through the factory with our window supplier. Another key item that we worked through with the Dahlin team was that the black windows were an upgrade cost compared to white windows. So whereas the initial design had black windows for the entire home, we came up with a very effective design solution that is still aesthetically pleasing, that combined some white windows on the sides of the home, complemented by the light blue siding, with the black windows strategically located on the front and rear of the home and complementing the dark siding colors at those locations as well. So just another collaborative effort with key input from all folks on the design team to come up with a solution that reflected the design intent without having to compromise while being cost effective. So then really the third and final item that I wanted to call some attention to was how we worked together to collaborate on the HVAC system, together with open web floor trusses for the floor framing, and specifically the RIA system. If you could advance one slide, Betsy.
If you can go back just a second in what you were saying, at least for me, you jumped out, so I missed the beginning of that transition to RIA, and I will go back that slide for you.
Okay, sure. Yeah. The third and final kind of challenge I wanted to call attention to is in order to accomplish the energy performance objectives and sustainability objectives, we really had to focus in on the HVAC systems for the home. And we needed to ensure that those were all located within conditioned space. So therefore, by definition, they have to be integrated into the structural components of the house. So the solution that we were able to implement uses the RIA air distribution system, which is comprised of 3 and 4 inch diameter flexible ducts and a family of fittings that can snap together to make airtight connections with those flexible ducts. And because of the small size, the air distribution system is able to be integrated into structural elements without having to make significant changes to the arrangement of the spaces in the home. So the other kind of key aspect of the RIA is that it is configured to have home run distribution of the ductwork. So from the main supply plenum at the air handler, all the ducts come up to separate takeoffs from that location to each register and diffuser spread throughout the home. And because of the airtight connection of the fittings and the fact that they can snap together, we were able to implement this approach in the modular environment, whereby the ductwork is installed in the first floor, second floor, third floor boxes in the factory. And then on site, we're able to snap them together from floor to floor. So the images are just showing in the factory how the ductwork is being incorporated and installed within the openings of the open web floor truss systems. And then if you could advance to the next slide as well, a lot of the ductwork was able to be routed above some of the ceilings, where there is again an interstitial space between the ceiling of the lower box and the floor of the box above it. So we were able to integrate all of these components inside the home within conditioned space, which delivers improved energy efficiency and optimized comfort. The next few slides are just detailing how that was configured in the various spaces. Again, this is the first floor of the home. So In the ADU, which is on the right side of the screen, there is a horizontal flow air handler to be installed in the conditioned crawl space. And then all the duct distribution is installed in the floor framing through the open web floor trusses. For the main townhome dwelling unit, the air handler is on the first floor in a mechanical closet with the ductwork routed through the ceiling, where it then would connect into the second floor. So the most significant impact on the spatial arrangement from this HVAC approach was on this second floor. The walls along the stair and at the one bathroom were doubled up to be a double 2x4 wall to allow for rear ducts through wall chases. And then again, you see on that drawing, the ductwork to the second floor was routed above the ceiling to ceiling diffusers throughout that space. And then again, many of those ducts went through the second floor wall to the third floor on the next drawing into the open web floor trusses again, where they're routed through the floor system to floor registers and high wall diffusers. Again, keeping all of that HVAC system and air distribution within the conditioned space of the home. Again, all of this was analyzed and engineered and solved all those problems, on paper before the home went into construction, and then we're able to seamlessly implement that strategy on the production line in the factory.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring everybody back in. I don't know why it's making me big. We don't want that. At least I don't want that. Oh, one more. Nicole's down here. So we do have a couple questions for you. One was, did the size of the front bay porch change due to the structural requirements?
No, the size of the front porch did not change. On the second floor porch, there was one wall segment on the right side of the front of the home where the initial design did provide for not a window, but an additional opening to provide visibility to the street. We did need to turn that section of wall into a shear wall that was fully opaque. But again, it was enough of a minor nuance that the overall design intent was really still met and was not compromised by that adjustment. And again, the walls on that second floor porch, the two side walls of that portal frame ended up being 18 inches wide instead of the initial intent was they would be 12-foot wide segments. So it was more a matter of slight massaging of the initial design rather than having to make a substantial change.
Yeah, and that was part of our process too, of going back and forth as Eric showed the schematics side by side, that we could do it live in 3D. So we're really not going back and forth, sending drawings live, see how this affected the design principles, and really kept it where we wanted it to be, but still keep the structural integrity of it.
So we're going to go until quarter after. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them to the chat now. I did want to ask something because I've been looking at attainability for a while of you guys. So you mentioned that this design change with the windows was done so that it would be much more cost effective. Can you tell us roughly how much cost that took out, if it's a percentage of how much the cost went down by doing that? Because I thought it was a really innovative way to, and I think you were accurate in saying that making those changes, you still get the aesthetics of the intent of the design. But I don't think people think of things, those kind of trade-offs in the way that you did. So is there a dollar figure or a percentage that you could put to that in terms of impact? Yeah,
the rough order of magnitude on the cost savings was approximately $10,000 for the window package. So there was a significant and key decision that needed to be made. Well, again, we were elated that we were able to, again, work collaboratively to come up with a design. We actually, Ryan and I felt like wow, this is actually looks better once we're done. And so it was important to challenge ourselves because of the cost implications. But it was something where we were high-fiving each other, as a team. It's like, wow, this kind of proves that we can work through the process and come up with a solution that accomplishes attainability while enhancing design intent and principles.
Yeah, Eric, and as Teri mentioned too, with the data showing what the buyers want in home, it's that not just going to cut costs as a whole, it is still keeping in mind of what they're willing to pay for if you put that in their space, the amount of natural light for the wellness aspect. So it was a holistic approach versus just saying we need to cut cost in this home.
So Dennis, I understand you're the money man when it comes to this in terms of how much the overall cost is. If someone were looking at this in Pittsburgh, what do the economics look like for the end user, both in terms of, I'm not sure if you looked at what you think the ADU would rent for, but I'm looking for a house now. Not that I want to buy this one, but it's a little small for me. But I'm looking for a house and saying, what I really want, I have to get something where I can have somebody take up part of my space. I need a renter in part of my space. So I think this is really interesting and could make a huge difference in terms of attainability for people. So what's the bottom line on the dollars and cents part of it?
Yeah, happy to answer that. And I also think we can tie in a question that I saw floating through the chat from Lourdes Salinas as well. So the cost savings that we're putting into this project, the intent is to translate that into the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So the focal point of this project has kind of been looking again within that missing middle housing typology. Within Pittsburgh itself, the household of 4, 80% AMI would be around $75,000 in household income. So our goal has been on the outset to look at how do we stay from 80% to 140% AMI and provide a housing solution in these markets or in these specific neighborhoods where that would typically not be achievable. So if you think it's roughly in rough numbers, 75,000 to 135,000 is kind of the income range for a household of 4 that we're targeting to be able to afford this to make this initial home attainable.
There's a question on the, I'm sorry. Nope. Okay. There's a question on the performance side or on the constructability side from Jake asking if conversations were had with MEP trades about cost savings of install with open web trusses versus I-joists.
I think we also figured out who was making popcorn earlier, and unfortunately that was my microphone. So I will try to be very succinct in my answer. Yes, we have worked closely with the folks in the factory, and they were happy to report that compared to installations that they have done in the past, where Structural Modular Innovations has built multiple high-performance homes that have complied with the most stringent criteria available, including passive home, living buildings, etc. And the RIA system caused far, far fewer headaches for them than other things that they have implemented or tried to do in the past. Again, because the components all snap together, they fit within framing elements. So it was welcomed with open arms by the folks in the factory. And we are collaborating and coordinating with the HVAC subcontractor for the on-site installation, which that has not yet been completed. But we've done all the upfront planning and actually got input from the site installer as well, just to kind of clarify the scope of work of what would be performed in the factory and what would be completed in the field. And we did all collectively agree that fundamental to that strategy should be complete as much of the work as we can in the factory to simplify the process of the final fit out on site. And the on-site HVAC sub was on board with that, as well as the folks at the factory.
Well, and you're going to be taking some folks into the factory look around. I'm going to let Dennis talk about that, so you can save your mic and feel free to pop in if you want to, Eric. But in a couple of weeks, coming up pretty soon in Pittsburgh, we've got a group touring in the factory to see what SMI is up to and this project in particular. Dennis, can you speak to that for a minute?
I certainly can. And just before I jump into that, I wanted to add something to Eric's point. You know, I've also had the opportunity to participate in a number of what I'll call almost like trade council working sessions that Eric's organized that have allowed us to work with trades that may not be 100% familiar with the process that we're embarking on, and help them provide the input not only for what, you know, again, obviously what we can optimize within the factory setting, but how they can each work together. To then connect the dots and what training might be needed at the factory to kind of streamline some of these solutions as we go forward. So to Ryan's excellent point that the R becomes the D down the road, you know, and it becomes something that's a repeatable process. A big part of this exercise for us has always been around empowerment, right? And I've used that word when we launched the project, but it's about empowering consumers to get into the home that they deserve, like you mentioned, Betsy, in markets that they might not otherwise be able to attain them. But it's also about making a lot of the things that we're talking about approachable to the industry, you know, and I think Nicole hit on this perfectly when she was going through her presentation. This regulatory drive that's taking place around embodied carbon doesn't have to be intimidating. The idea of working with local trades or an established trade base to transition from an on-site to an element of it being built offsite to all of it being built offsite doesn't have to be intimidating. And then working with the team at Dahlin to help understand how we translate that to the industry, and then also working with Professional Builder to get that message out. I think, again, so that empowerment piece and seeing it in action with Eric and the team at SMI has just it's been really exciting to watch that at that level, because I think sometimes that's where we find we can have the most sticking point and some of the most friction. So on that side, and then that we're going to bring that to life even more so through the factory tour that we were running on October 6th, or that we're participating in, I should say, is the Housing Innovation Alliance. But the local Realtors Association here in Pittsburgh, RAMP, and the local Green Building Alliance are going to be running an event at SMI to introduce both of their organizations to some of the benefits around these types of homes, and the homes that are built within a factory, I'll call like a systems built housing environment. Talk about some of the sustainability benefits, and in a marketplace where inventory is constrained, I think we have there's a great story here where you can go from permit to keys in less than 90 days on vacant sites that are located all over the city. So I think that we'll have an opportunity there to not only understand what are some of the differences between the terms that we hear in the home building industry between modular construction and manufactured housing. What are the different types of modern methods of construction or factory built housing systems, but then also get to see it in action and understand the implications it has as it ties back to many of our core themes for this particular concept home around sustainability and overall comfort for the consumer.
Cool. So if you're not in Pittsburgh, if you are in Pittsburgh, Natalie will put the link to the event page in the chat, so you can see that. She's been diligently sharing a ton of stuff, links to articles and press releases, and more in-depth things, content related to the data that came out from the third wave of the study. So feel free to get all of that good stuff in the chat here. If you end up having more questions when we're offline, put those here. We'll periodically look and see what additional information we can give you. But if you're not in Pittsburgh and you're not aware of this event, come back and look at the chat. How can you get involved in the next wave of the concept homes? And where should we be looking for more information moving forward? Teri.
Sure. Well, I think that's a great question. I think one of the places is we have a concept home website, which has all of our partner information. It has the floor plans, fact sheets on each of the two homes, as well as links to a lot of the published content that was authored by Nancy Keenan of Dahlin as a result of wave 3 of the study. And very simply, it's americaathomesteady.com. So there's a lot of insights and information there. But I think Dennis also alluded to the partnership with Pro Builder Magazine and the opportunity to be able to share some of that content, not only in their publication and on their digital assets, but also at the International Builders Show next year in Vegas. So I think the short-term answer is follow us on LinkedIn, check out the Concept Home page. And then I know I can speak honestly about any one of the 6 people gathered on the screen here today. We went into this entire endeavor during the darkest early days of COVID with one goal in mind, to try to learn what this meant to how people thought about their homes and communities, what this seismic event that we've all lived through, but really to be open source and to be honestly and authentically and organically sharing the insights we learned so that we can all try to help our noble industry face the challenges that it faces and to continue to try to make the world a better place for people. So we're very open-hearted and open-minded and open-armed, and we'll be willing to share and help everyone else, apply this as best they can in their own world as well. So I hope that's a decent answer to your question, Betsy.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put you on the spot, Ryan, as well. What would you want somebody's main takeaway, since you guys are the intel inside the design, both the design of the building and the interior design of the buildings for these 2 homes? What would you want them to take away from a design perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really that understanding, and I'll say it again, who's going to live there and how will they live. And it's not a, what did we do last time? What's our competition doing to us? But it's really understanding that if you can design specifically, and we have the data that shows what these people want in a home, and it's not just home, it's community. These are specific homes on an infill lot, but as we mentioned a little bit about how that lives in community, safety aspects, eyes on the street type thing. It's really taken that extra step to just understand that. And people are willing to choose things in home and in community if it's designed right for them.
Cool. Well, thank you all. And before we go, I do want to take the last 2 minutes or minute, if I can, to share just a couple of updates on things that we've got coming up soon on the Alliance front. So if you're not in Pittsburgh, but maybe you're going to be in at the EBA conference that's coming up in Salt Lake City, October 12th and 13th. We are doing a road trip there where we're going to be visiting Woodside Homes, one of their communities, as well as their inspiration gallery. We're going to visit with Ivory Homes and Ivory Innovations, talk about their whole process of how they get from fostering innovation at the university to incorporating it into their for sale and for rent products out in the field. We're also going to be visiting a very progressive community and very large community with its own zip codes called Daybreak from Larry H. Miller that is doing quite a bit in terms of water conservation that they're going to share with us. And we're going to see Bamcor as a bamboo structural material. Hopefully we're going to see it installed in the field. But there's great companies that we're visiting with, and there's also great companies that are joining us on those visits. So if it's of interest to you, please take a look at this QR code, scan the QR code. It'll take you directly to our event page for more information. And then we're already working on our big event for the year and the second round of our innovation competition called Pitch Fest, which will be hosted at the Housing Innovation Summit in Denver, the 23rd through 25th of April of next year. And the summit itself is a 2-day program with the Pitch Fest pitches incorporated into those 2 days, as well as optional tours on day 3. And we're going to be launching the application for Pitch Fest the 1st of October. So if you have an idea for innovation in any of our 5 big mission areas, hopefully focused on production housing, so, larger scale production home building across the country, you can get more information on the Pitch Fest website. So both of these QR codes are also active, and you can visit either of those websites for more information, or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. always happy to give you more details. But thanks to everybody for sharing more information about this project today, and look forward to the next one that we have when we talk about the 412. So for everyone who joined us today, thanks so much and have a great rest of your day. And we'll hopefully see you online again soon. Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everybody.
much, Betsy.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.